else familiar with these sensory issues? Anybody here have no senses whatsoever? Anybody's senses getting affected by the air quality of the room? Anybody's physiology going down because of the heat? Anybody's thoughts being affected by it? You're comfortable? It's like my wife, she's always hot. So she'll turn the AC on. I'm wrapped up in a blanket. I say, it's freezing in here. I feel perfect. Or I feel absolutely fine. Have the fans on. She says, I don't know what's wrong with you guys. I am just dripping with sweat over here. So anybody here have something referred to as sensory dysregulation? Anybody know what that means? OTs? Any OTs here? Fine. Yes. Are you going to brave it?
Basically just that you're unable to correctly interpret your surroundings.
Unable to correctly interpret your surroundings. So if we had a Republican on this aisle and a Democrat over here, and you asked them to interpret the same environment, they'd read it very differently.
Basically, you're either very or under responsive to.
Okay. Over or under responsive. So those are the two ends of a continuum. You're either hypersensitive, which means somebody else feels fine in the current temperature. Well, for you, it's excruciating, it's unbearable because you're hypersensitive. The other end of the continuum is hyposensitive, where it can be sweltering heat. Doesn't even faze you. You barely feel it. And that can mean any of your senses. And how many are there, by the way? How many senses are there? 7? You sure about that? 8? Are you just guessing or do you know? Well, tell me the ones you know. Okay, we can't all talk at once. Taste, sight, smell, touch, hearing. Yeah, taste, 6. Okay, those are the main ones. Are there any more? Oh, who was that? And who are you? You're an OT? Why didn't you raise your hand before when I asked for OTs? Oh, so that you would feel not so guilty because you didn't raise your hand, but you didn't have to raise it so high as to commit to possibly being called upon. Well, thank you for getting past that and stepping up now, because we really needed you and you were there for us. Thank you. So tell us what vestibular is. Where in your body is it located? Your inner ear. And what about your inner ear allows your brain to sense movement? Including the semicircular canals. Everybody knows what those are? I've seen a lot of head nods. Do you not know what that is? Does someone not? This is your opportunity to learn and grow. Does somebody not know what the semicircular canals are? You don't? Okay. Would you like to know? Thank you for asking. Because now, Kayla can contribute to your growth. So you're going to tell her what the semicircular canals are? How many are there? Okay. How are they kind of shaped? Yeah. They're like little loops. And what's inside them? What else? Fluid. So when the fluid moves, it sends a signal to your brain about what's moving in what direction. It'll tell you whether you're moving front to back or whether you're on your head or whether you're spinning around. The dysregulation comes in when your brain doesn't interpret in real time how things are moving. Would that be accurate? Now, for someone that's hypersensitive in their vestibular system, which I am, The plane ride in through heavy turbulence is a nightmare. I came in yesterday early, got to my hotel around 1, and at 5 o'clock I had to pry myself out of bed to get something to eat because I was so shaken. It took so long for my system to settle back down. I also have temperature sensitivity, specifically to heat. So the heat in this room is causing me a tremendous amount of difficulty. So even though that I'm saying, can we turn it down? It's not just for you. It's also for me. Now, I happen to be hypersensitive in every sense that I have. When it comes to the dentist, I have to be knocked out. The last dentist I had put 7 shots of Novocaine in my gums. I still felt everything he did. So that's when we realized I need to be knocked out. But then we did that. And I had an entire conversation with my wife I didn't remember. Now, we still haven't hit all the senses. That was vestibular. What else is there? Proprioceptive. Now you're all coming out of the woodwork. So what's proprioceptive besides a long word? Okay. What does the proprioceptive senses tell your brain? Where you're at in the world? Okay. Because thanks to my proprioception, I know that I'm in Minot, North Dakota. Man, your proprioception are the nerves in your big muscles and in your joints that tell you where you are in space. Tell you that you're standing up, that you're sitting down, that you're walking. Your proprioceptive nerves work in conjunction with your vestibular. Because the vestibular system tells your brain where your head is in space. Proprioception says where the rest of the body is. Now, if you're dysregulated, and these two do not play nice together, what happens when you're moving? Clumsy. What's often referred to as motor planning issues, tripping over your own feet. And for somebody, they say the solution is, just practice. Just practice more and more repetition. And suddenly, your central nervous system will get in sync. Does it work like that? But people that don't understand sensory integration, which means getting everything to work together, don't understand what the issue is. So they will continue to criticize, condemn, complain, call someone a klutz, a nerd, whatever it is. Oh, you're just lazy or just not trying hard enough. When you cannot just choose to regulate your nervous system. But is there any profession on this planet with a unique skill set that is uniquely qualified to help you integrate a dysregulated nervous system, Kayla? Yes. Who? OTs. Occupational therapists. I love occupational therapists. They're very creative, very resourceful, and are so uniquely gifted at spotting out the unique dysregulation and what to do about it. Because I have so many challenges. One of them is dysgraphia. You know what dysgraphia is, yes? Dysgraphia. Yes. Yeah, well, I'm a 42-year-old. I've pretty much reduced everything to signing my name, and even that's physically uncomfortable. I need to concentrate to get all the strokes in. And sometimes if I'm really tired, I just say forget it. Because it's too hard to do it. Now, there are so many quirky things about dysgraphia. One of my boys, if he has to print, it looks like hieroglyph. If he has to do cursive, it's like calligraphy. Different muscles coordinate better under certain circumstances than others. Welcome to dysregulation. It's unpredictable. You ever hear the old saying, well, he's really good in this area, how come he can't be good in that area? Ever heard that? Dysregulation. Sometimes you're organized in one area and you are completely disorganized in another. That's the quirky central nervous system that we have. Any questions about sensory stuff so far? So we could talk all day on this alone. I'm going to throw one more thing out there and we'll take a break. How many senses have we hit so far? The main 6, proprioception, vestibular. 7, there's actually 10 senses. There are subsets of the touch sense. Temperature, pressure, and pain. That can all be dysregulated. I already talked about temperature. I met one man. This was years and years before I even had kids. He was very tall, very monotone, very serious, knew anything and everything about sports. In the dead of winter, he only wore shorts. I suspect it was more of a touch sensitivity. He didn't like certain fabrics. I never saw this guy with pants, ever. Some of it might be temperature. He doesn't like the increased heat when he wears too many layers. Pain. We met somebody who cuts themselves and say, oh, how about that? My father, king of the Aspies, doesn't feel pain. There was one time when he was hammering something, and he drove a nail right through the muscle between his thumb and his first finger. All the way through. What did he do? He pulled it out, put a piece of duct tape around it so he could keep working. I couldn't do that. I don't want to do that. For me, it would be an airlift to the hospital because I'm hypersensitive in the area of pain. Now, pressure, I'll make this and then answer your question. Pressure, I have found, correct me if I'm wrong here, OTs, is the all-purpose solution to dysregulation. Deep pressure. Yes? Because it gives you proprioceptive input. Puts pressure on your joints, pressure on your muscles, and organizes everything like that. It's amazing how many people don't realize this. There are some school OTs that don't know this. And they also don't know how to achieve it in a resourceful way. They just have stereotypical ways. Oh, just put on the weighted vest and you'll be fine. Really? How many people have found success with a weighted vest? Would you agree that the more anxious you are, the more pressure you need? The more dysregulated you are, the more pressure you need. Makes sense, right? A weighted vest only gives one amount of pressure. There are times when you need to have your leg muscles lean down with an elbow. There are times maybe you need to hang from a bar. That's my favorite. Because it stretches out my torso, it opens up my spine, and it integrates me very quickly. You had a question over here. In my case, he wouldn't even notice it. Paper cut, he wouldn't notice. So if he got a paper cut, he'd carry on, but if he broke his collarbone? So what you're describing is two different things. Like I said, there's the submodalities of touch. So it sounds like he's hypersensitive in the touch senses, but hyposensitive in the pain receptors. So he breaks something and doesn't feel it. That's because he's hyposensitive pain-wise, but hypersensitive with touch. Make sense? With this young woman over here. He was explaining that her son can get really over the top when he gets something like a paper cut, but if he breaks a bone, nothing. So I explained that what that is dysregulation of the submodalities of touch, that he seems very hypersensitive when it comes to touch. I'm hypersensitive with light touches, because having to ride here from Minneapolis to Minot in the puddle jumper where you're cramped next to somebody who is always brushing next to your arm, and then people are coming down the aisle and brushing up against you. It's like this far from snapping. brush, 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 dysregulates you, and you try and regulate yourself only to have that assaulted again. So that's very difficult. But his pain sensitivities were hyposensitive. So it goes to show, it's all touch, but there's different pain receptors that can be dysregulated. So in other words, there does not have to be logic in dysregulation. It is what it is. You just need to understand where the dysregulation is so you know how to address it. So she has a delayed reaction to pain. She feels it a while later. That has to do with processing speed. How quickly does your brain register the input? So about how long would it be? Anywhere from a couple seconds to a different couple minutes. So and if you do see it happen, then you just kind of wait it out. But if you don't see it happen, then all of a sudden she's in the room and she has a strong reaction. You don't know where the heck it came from. So as she's gotten older and she's learned more strategies for communication, she can now let you in on her experience and tell you what's going on. That's outstanding. So she's able to self-advocate and say, this is what wasn't working for me. Now to answer your question, the top of the page where it says, when your nervous system is balanced, you know it through the experience of, ready for this? Calm and focus. Because when you look at any kid that has ADD, ADHD, you know the kid is dysregulated because they're agitated and they can't pay attention. They're not calm and they're not focused. So sit still is not a solution. Okay? It's not a strategy. It's a command. Proprioception, deep pressure, accomplishes both. Helps you achieve calm and focus. You got a kid that's been sitting on a hard chair for a couple hours and is all fidgety, messing with their neighbor, fiddling with their pencil, turning pages in the book. What does this child need? Proprioception. They need to move. They need to get up out of that chair. Because sitting in that hard chair all day in school, is that conducive to calm and focus? Let me tell you a rule for the classroom that also applies to your ability to stay attentive here. Ready for the rule? Your mind is only as awake as what the butt can take. When your backside is uncomfortable, all of a sudden you start squirming and wiggling around. Where does your attention go? To how uncomfortable your butt feels. And no amount of, pay attention, eyes front, listen to me, pay attention, does not solve that problem. You need to get up, you need to move. You need to use your body. Your body is the best tool you have to organize yourself. More kids on the spectrum, ADD, should learn yoga. You learn to twist and turn your body in very interesting ways to apply proprioception very strategically. Kids shouldn't need wiggle chairs. They shouldn't need to have little accessories to require them to sit still. Sitting still, eyes front, not talking to your neighbor for an extended period of time is not a natural act. So trying to teach anybody to master this is not preparing them for life. Where are they going to use it besides the classroom? I mean, even here, I encourage you to stand up and take stretch breaks. I encourage you to get up and move. I encourage you to do what you need to do to take care of yourself. You won't hurt my feelings. What you're going to be doing is taking care of yourself, meeting your own needs to remain calm and focused. Because if you're sitting here quietly the whole time and you're missing everything I'm saying because you're becoming disorganized, who benefits from that? Nobody. Everybody's time is wasted. So you must be able to use your body in whatever way you need to remain calm and focused. Make sense? So teach these kids how to use their own body. Let them move. Because I've heard this from so many teachers, including the ones that educate my own kids. Well, he's losing valuable instruction time if he leaves the room. He's losing valuable instruction time if he's in the room, because he's not paying attention to you. He's spending all his energy to not snap and get an office referral for inappropriate behavior. Question?
When I work with parents have children in the school, it seems like in early school years, kindergarten, first grade, third grade, it seems okay that those children can move around, but magically by middle school, you're supposed to be responsible enough to sit here and adjust for that audience. So I'm just wondering why all of a sudden there's age that people have to be responsible.
So you're seeing a difference in expectations. When the kids are kindergarten, first, third grade, they're a little bit more lenient. They're expecting them to be wigglers.
Yeah, it's okay to be a wiggler then. But all of a sudden it's not okay to be a wiggler, but we haven't taught them.
So when you're in middle school, it's no longer forgivable. So the most important thing to look at is throughout that time, have any strategies been introduced to this child? Strategies that the child implements versus the typically IEP-driven reactive strategies where the adults are responsible for knowing when the child needs a break and telling the child. Because if that's the case, there's nothing in there to teach that child responsibility, resourcefulness, resilience. Nothing to teach that child insight into their own experience, to know when they are reaching their threshold, when they are losing their sense of calm and focus. Because those are really the only two benchmarks these kids need to be aware of. All that, tell me how you feel. What light are you on? Is your anger at a yellow or is it a red? The more you give somebody whose nervous system is dysregulated, the more you give them to pay attention to, the more they're going to miss. There's just too much that's being dysregulated in their system. Give them two things to pay attention to. How calm are you? How focused are you? If you begin to lose any of those two, you are becoming dysregulated. What do you need to do to get it back? Simple. But the kids need to know this about themselves, whether they're in first grade or whether they're in middle school or high school. And the kids typically don't learn this stuff. A lot of them, their entire skill set, strategy set, toolbox in school is to do whatever they need to do to avoid criticism. That becomes their primary outcome. Not to learn, not to grow, not to feel significant, not to make contribution, but to avoid criticism. You know how to find out if that is your kid's MO? One question. Did you have a good day? Yeah. How do you know? I didn't get in trouble. Because if a child's measure of a good day is the absence of negativity, there's something seriously messed up about that. He or she did not feel successful, didn't feel accomplished, didn't feel like they were appreciated in any way, but I did not get criticized, I did not get in trouble, therefore I am a success. Far too many kids have that experience. And it's always at their expense because they have to go through the entire day without getting their needs met to do that. How many have had the experience of a child that is an angel at school only to come home and melt down? Okay? Why is that? Because they have to go the entire school day without getting their needs met, and they come home an empty bucket. Suffocating, dehydrated of emotional input, did not get what they needed, so they have to come home and implode. They collapse because they've had so much not done for them. So they come home and you get to see it. Because what have they learned? They've learned that needing to take care of themselves in unconventional ways is wrong. It's inappropriate. It's maladaptive. But we don't want you to have an accommodation. We don't want you to have to do something unique for your unique nervous system. You need to be like everybody else. You need to be, what's the term? Indistinguishable from your peers. Anybody else here want to be insignificant? Indistinguishable? Don't want anything to be special about you whatsoever? I didn't think so. There was a hand over here? So the school is saying, they're saying this as though it's a positive. So, if I'm hearing you correctly, wouldn't you rather they be good at school and hold it together and come home and fall apart where they feel safe? Yes, I would like my child to see the world as a dangerous place. Because that's what they're asking you. Wouldn't your child be better off not causing anybody else any inconvenience, especially me, the teacher, and then come and make it your problem? Well, my question to the teacher would be, what does my child learn from that approach? And seriously ask the question. Because what the child learns from that is that everybody else's needs matter more. That you should not expect or require your needs to matter to other people. You should not expect or require people to be respectful of your unique differences, your unique needs. That's what that teaches. Because those are the kids that end up being extreme homebodies. Because they learn that leaving their house is going on safari. Or you don't know what number of animals or unpredictable experiences are going to come at you, make you vulnerable, exploit you, put you in a meltdown, and not be there for you when it happens. Yes? Okay? So when they say they don't want them acting out, behaving at school because you don't want them to be made fun of. Kids are only going to be made fun of in an environment where disrespect for diversity is tolerated. Period. If part of that classroom setting, it is not a requirement that we all have unique gifts in this room. Our unique differences bring value here. We are here to learn and grow together. If that's what's modeled, bullying, ostracization does not happen. I've been in school districts before where they actively model having each other's back. We are not in this classroom to compete with each other. It's not about who has the highest grade. It's not about who turns in the test the fastest. We only succeed in reference to how good we are to each other, where character is emphasized in the classroom. But if there is some belief from the teacher, from the administration, that academics is the focus, not character, that's where stuff like you just explained happens. Where people are not required to be decent human beings. Does that make sense? So, we can't talk about the kids' differences because of privacy. We can't talk about the Asperger's. We can't talk about the Down syndrome. Okay. Is difference not universal in the human experience? You don't need to talk about human difference in terms of a disability. You talk about it as an essential aspect of our humanity. We all have strengths, we all have challenges, right? What makes it a disability is that you pathologize the difference. You pathologize the weakness. It's a disorder, it's a syndrome. Can't talk about that because of the label you put on it, but you can talk about diversity. Anybody here sports fans? What if on a football team, everybody was quarterback? You have to be the same. No one can stand out. How effective would that team be? Any thoughts? The team that's working with your kid, is everybody in OT? Everybody the school psychologist? Nobody can stand out. Don't want anybody to be different. You must be indistinguishable from your peers. Everybody must be a carbon copy of the other. You need diversity. You need diverse skill sets. If everybody is the same, not one of them will grow, not 1 inch. Because only in the presence of diversity do you require more of each other. I have what I call the law of contribution. And if you teach this to kids in the classroom, that criticism, that bullying won't take place. This is the law of contribution. My strengths are the reasons you need me, and my challenges are the reasons I need you. We are put on this planet to complement each other, not to all be good at the same stuff. If somebody is not good at something, if somebody's struggling, you were put on this planet to help that person, not to victimize them. That's your opportunity to contribute, not to make someone suffer. If you have strengths that can solve that person's problem, that's your job. If there's something that you're not particularly good at, then you need to find somebody else who was put on this earth to bring that gift to the world. My father's gifted with engineering. Can build anything he wants without blueprints. His brain just works that way. You cannot have a conversation with that man to save your life. But guess what? That's not why he's here. His genius is in his hands, not in his lips. Me, on the other hand, I can't fix anything to save my life. So I can try and be just like Dad, learn all the electronic stuff, and there was a time I did, in one ear and out the other, until I realized that's not why I'm here. I'm here because I can verbally articulate my experience better than anyone I've met. So that's what I do. If I need something fixed, I find someone else who that is their genius. And I allow them to live their life's purpose by allowing it to contribute it to my life. Thank you for sharing your genius with me. You are so good at that. You have added value and quality to my life because that's why I need you. Does that make sense? If we taught that value in the classroom, bullying wouldn't happen. You'd see somebody else struggling and say, this is an opportunity for me to contribute, to add value to that person's life and make their life better. You don't need to talk about disabilities to do that. You talk about human variation, human variety, human difference, and that law of contribution. My strengths are the reasons you need me. My challenges are the reasons I need you. That's the human condition. That's how we take care of each other. Now, we've talked about 10 senses. There's actually an 11th. Anybody have any idea what that is? Not emotions. It's called synesthesia. And yes, I will spell it for you. It's Synesthesia. Synesthesia. It means perceived together. It's basically the result of cross-wiring in the senses, where one sense is triggered and then another one fires off simultaneously. For example, my wife was playing piano. She took piano lessons as a kid. She stopped, and I just found this out as an adult. She would start seeing colored rings as she hit the keys. So she had auditory visual synesthesia, which meant when there was auditory output, it triggered a visual sensation. There was a young man named Daniel Temmet. Anybody familiar with him? He recited Pi to like 1 million places a few years ago. And he has varieties of synesthesia. He said that when he sees numbers, each number has a color. So what he actually did was memorize color patterns, not number sequences. I have several varieties of synesthesia. One of the most complicated ones is I have, probably could be best referred to as auditory touch synesthesia. Certain sounds create a physical sensation of pressure. So if I am, more entertaining things, different people in my lives, when I hear their voice, there's a different pattern of pressure on my body. So if one of my sons talks, I hear pressure in both ears and in my sternum. Now, if that child yells, it's hard for me to breathe because there's too much pressure. So it's not just a matter of you're being too loud. It's stop it. It's too much. I can't handle the sensation. If there is a vibration on the floor, the sound of that vibration, I feel like I'm suffocating. If it's a real high pitch sound, I have an experience of pain. Like someone had a hot needle driving it into my eardrum. Then, of course, there are other sounds like the sound of certain vacuum cleaners where I will literally start to doze off because it's incredibly calming. And that's synesthesia, that's perceiving together. I met one woman who said that facial hair had smell. That if she saw facial hair on someone, she got a certain smell. And one difficulty she was having is one of her best friends decided to grow a mustache and a beard. And she said, how do I tell him that every time I see him now I smell garbage? How do you explain that to someone? I mean, I don't know what she ever did with that, but I think it's a very reasonable conversation to have with someone. If you explain to that person why that's the case, that it's not personal, it's just a neurological trigger. Anybody have this experience and didn't know it?
After years and years of marriage, my husband bought a harmonica prior to that. Every time he played the harmonica, it just drove me nuts. And I really didn't know how to explain that to him. So one day I just took the bull by the horn, so to speak, and said, honey, when I'm gone, will you play the harmonica? Because every time he played it, it was like somebody took their fingernails and scratched on the floor.
So your husband playing a harmonica was like nails on a chalkboard to you.
Yes.
What was your specific, was it just that you didn't like the sound, or was there a different sense that was triggered by it?
I just didn't like the sound, and it made me very uncomfortable and like screeching, and I didn't like it at all.
Because that doesn't sound so much like synesthesia. If somebody played the harmonica and you saw color or you had a certain taste in your mouth where there was a different sensation in your body that made no sense to have at the same time, as opposed to simply not liking the sound. Because there are certain sounds that, people have preferences, certain sounds you do like, certain sounds you don't like. And it sounds more like that's the case for you. You simply don't like it. Would anybody else have any kind of synesthesia they weren't aware of? Well, keep this in mind when working with the kids. Because oftentimes, kids might be having this experience that they can't communicate it to you. And that is the reason why they're having discomfort. Like a certain teacher's voice will be painful to you. I remember one time I took one of my boys for an eye exam. And it was a female optometrist. And every time she talked, he got a big smile on his face. And at some point he said, she makes my belly tickle. So he felt some kind of visceral sensation because of the tone of her voice. It almost made him giggle because she talked, because it gave him some kind of a sensation. I saw a hand over here. Yes. Oh. See, that's the thing. It's difficult to measure because people typically don't know they have it. And there's no way to detect it. You can't do an MRI and see synesthesia. It's self-reported. Because I remember I read a story where a girl was learning how to spell. And I can't remember the letter, like if it was a C. The dad was teaching her, how to take a C and just complete it and turn it into an O. She says, oh, so you want me to turn it orange? What are you talking about? Well, when it's a C, it's a green, but when you make it an O, it's an orange. So she remembered what color it needed to be changed to know how to change it. And up until that point, nobody knew this is how she was learning spelling. So she was learning how to spell through color patterns. So it just kind of came up in conversation. She just kind of shared it that way. So your son sees blue and he cries.
Yeah, we know where blue jeans, we have to get different color jeans. He would put them on. At first I thought it was the material. I thought it was how they felt. But if I put jeans on that are gray, they don't have a problem. I put jeans on that are black, he never cried.
How old was he when you discovered this?
He was 7. And they started seeing it when he was in early intervention.
And when was that?
When he started when he was very young, probably like 9 months. He had other issues going on. But every time blue came on, he would cry.
Even at 9 months old?
Yeah. And I didn't know what it was. In fact, the doctor just told me, well, he's all right. Because he had some stuff going on, they just said he's gifted. You know, there's something going on in his brain that we don't know about.
That's the explanation?
That's the explanation.
He cries whenever he sees blue. That means he is gifted.
I think they said that because they didn't actually help me explore it of why that was happening, and they didn't want to think about it because they just thought it was weird.
So does he have means of communication now?
Yeah.
How does he communicate to you?
He uses an iPad, he uses gestures, and he's becoming verbal.
Is he able to tell you what blue does?
No.
Has he ever been asked?
Yes. I have. And his IPT.
What's the question you're asking him?
They're putting a picture of blue in front of him, and he learned his where, why, and what. So we're asking him why. All he does is shake his head. No, no. So I don't really know what it is. I'm assuming we took him years to teach him no and yes and what they mean. But since he's mostly nonverbal, I really have no way of telling if he actually knows what that means.
Instead of asking why, the question to ask is what? And go through his senses. When you see blue, what do you smell? What do you hear? What do you see? What do you feel? See if anything sensory comes up, because if there's some kind of a synesthesia happening there, you're more likely to get at with a what question. Why is too big? Because he doesn't know why. It's just his experience. It's just the case. That's like saying, why are you a woman? Why? Tell me. Well, I was just kind of born this way. Really? Is it that simple? You know, why is too big a question for a constant? But what? What is your experience? Because his experience clearly is a strong emotional component to it. But what is it? And see if that doesn't help shed some light to it. So he had colic all the time. Did the blue seem to exacerbate that?
Well, at the time I didn't think about it until we figured out later that it just seems to be blue. At the time I didn't know. I was out of my mind. I had another kid who only cried from 6 to 9. That was supposedly.
It was very considerate. See, the kid who didn't like the blue cried all the time, but other kid just from 6 to 9.
And the days that I would color on would be good, but I didn't associate it with color. I just thought, it's having a really good day. I'm doing something right. But I kept a journal of everything I did that day, but I didn't reference to color.
Have you stumbled upon any colors that calm?
Yes, yellow.
Okay. Have you ever tried them in combination? To see if you can kind of throw the balance off, where if there's more yellow than blue, if that would help. Because what you want to find is something sensorily that will compensate or offset the stress of another. Last summer, I stumbled upon something that was completely unanticipated. My wife and I decided to go on a hike in one of the state parks near our home. And the day we chose, it was 95 degrees outside. Heat intolerance. But me, I was hyper-focused. I wanted to see a natural waterfall, and come hell or high water, I was going to see a natural waterfall. We knew we were going to be hiking for a couple miles, so we needed to have supplies. So we got a backpack loaded up with water and Gatorade and all that fun stuff, and I wanted to carry it. She kept offering, want me to carry it? It's kind of heavy. It's kind of hot. I said, no, I want to carry it. As long as I had that backpack on, for whatever reason, it didn't feel so hot. I felt that I was more focused, that I could just keep going. Anybody guess what was working? The pressure. The weight on my shoulders was offsetting my heat sensitivity. It was actually helping my nervous system regulate better because I was carrying a heavy backpack. I was carrying it by necessity. It never occurred to me that would be a sensory benefit. Wait, but you said if he saw the sky, he cried. So there are certain circumstances under which blue does not affect him. So what are the circumstances where blue does not affect him?
Well, if he's not wearing blue and he's in school and, they have darkened windows and stuff, he's in school, kids are wearing blue jeans.
So if other people are wearing blue, he's fine.
He could point to the color blue, he could say blue.
So where does the blue have to be for him to be upset? So if the blue is on him, or if the blue is in the sky. But if it's on somebody else, it doesn't bother him. How many different textures have you experimented with? Like whatever's blue, what is it made of? You've got your polyester, your rayon, your cotton, wool. Because what you've just described, blue is not the problem. Context is an issue as well. It's where the blue is. Because if other people can be wearing blue and it doesn't affect him, then it's not the color itself. So, a couple hands now. You two want to fight it out, or? Okay. Are we hearing this? So the sense that if the amount of blue is overwhelming, it feels chaotic. Now there is some line of thinking out there. There's a colleague of mine on the spectrum who wears special glasses with Erlen lenses. You heard of those? Okay, you can Google it rather. Had a mouthwash moment. IRLEN, right? Now I'm seeing some heads nodded. You want to describe what you know about Erlen lenses? Well, the theory behind that is that different frequencies of color can be regulating or dysregulating. And it's expensive to get the test. Now, one thing that I stumbled upon is with my light sensitivity, white pages of a book give me a headache. It affected my ability to track, to read lines across a page, and to read for long periods of time because the light was dysregulating. However, if you find a colored covering to put over it, something like a lighter blue, some people like pink or a green, all of a sudden, new life comes to that page. I have a much different relationship to it. This colleague of mine who wears the Erlen lenses, if she doesn't wear them, the world looks fuzzy, and it's not a focus issue. It's not that she's got a problem with the lens on her eye. She has difficulty processing that color. So I'm wondering if with your son, this might not be something to look into. Because if it's just blue and it's just him and it's in that huge amount across the sky, too much blue, that specific frequency of light can be extremely dysregulating. So I think your insight of the fact that he can't easily turn away from it is a very interesting one, because that could be a strong possibility. Remember when I said earlier that I needed to hear from you because there was a lot of genius here that could help each other? Hello? That's why you all need to speak up. Thank you two very much. Right here. Is there anything for sound? Are you talking to reduce sound sensitivity? Any speech and language people here? Anybody familiar with the listening program? Hearing some heads nod. This works better or not?
It's really hard for nobody trained that I know of in this area to do it, sell it, try it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, there are different approaches out there. I've come across a couple where it's basically for a certain length of time, a certain length of time each day, the child listens to recorded music. Some of it's classical, some of it's pop, and there are some frequencies kind of hidden in the background that tweaks the ear in just a certain way to try and change the sensitivity in their inner ear, kind of reprogram its sensitivity. And the difficulty with that program is it's like any other. It's really hit or miss. Because when I first began getting some help from my then 7-year-old, my oldest, and I was telling about all my sensory sensitivities to the OT, she wanted to try the listening program on me to see if it worked for adults. What happened was certain sensitivities became more sensitive, so I stopped using it. So there's a variety of repercussions to going that route.
We did that with my son, and it was, we found out for about 3 years we had to do it every 6 months, but we had to go to the children's hospital in Minneapolis. And he was better.
So your son had to do it, what, every 6 months or for 6 months at a time?
Every 6 months, and it was a 10-week period, so he'd do it anywhere from 5 minutes to 30 minutes a day, twice a day.
So anywhere from 5 to 30 minutes a day, twice a day. Was there any benefit to it?
Yeah, he was a lot calmer.
Okay.
Yep, not as agitated. It seemed like he would be more in control.
So he was a lot calmer. So whatever was happening auditorily that was dysregulating, that was sensitive, seemed to be reduced. So your son found value. That's wonderful. Okay.
Therapeutic listening is another one.
Mm-hmm.
In Florida, but they don't have any ones out there. But I have my little sister, and she huge stuff sensitivity difference with her.
So your little sister had sound sensitivity?
Yeah, windshield wipers drove her nuts.
Okay. The squeak of the windshield wipers drove her nuts?
And when she didn't do it for a week over like a camp or something, she would do it, and then she'd get in the car and it would be rainy. She'd freak out, but on the way there she was fine.
One of my challenges, the turn signal on the car, click, 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 click. It feels like someone's thumping on my throat. So I wait until it's time to turn, then I hit it. So I don't get run into. But yeah, certain sounds like that, they can be so subtle that other people can tune out. For some people, it can be an excruciating experience. So did the program that she used work for her?
It works great for her, but it's teenager, she's old enough that it's too much subsided. But there's nothing around here. Like for any of my patients, there's nothing that I can really offer them as far as something like that. Because I don't have the one-on-one training that my supervisor did for them.
So if the resources aren't here, one thing you can look into is do some research online. Find who's doing it anywhere and see if it's a tight enough program where you can just have someone consult at a distance. Because these CDs can be mailed to you. It's pretty simple. You know, they're pre-programmed. You stick them in a CD player, put on your headphones, and follow the prescription. So it might be doable that way. You just need to find someone who can do that. Okay? Well, there's the listening program. What's the one you used? Therapeutic listening. Is there another one? What's that? Can you say that louder? Yeah, the Erlen lenses. That's more for visual. Now, here's one thing that's tricky, though, about sound sensitivity, is trying to differentiate between sound sensitivity and auditory processing issues. Who's familiar with auditory processing? Okay? You guys are going to have to just come out in the middle and battle it out, because when your hands go at the same time, what can you explain about auditory processing?
I'm not super familiar with it, but it's just basically audiologist and grad course that specializes in it, and basically the way he describes it is you either hear things incorrectly or you hear them at the way speed compared to typical. So a lot of times kids that have central auditory processing disorder need a lot longer time to absorb and relay information when they hear it.
So sometimes it's processing speed, where you ask somebody a question and they're not going to answer you right away because their brain needs time to catch up with what was just said to them. So if you are asking somebody and you want to see, do they know the answer because of how fast they can respond? With a kid with auditory processing, that's a lousy criteria. Because being able to respond like that, if your child's brain doesn't do that. I used to work with a young man who literally took no less than 1 minute for him to respond to any question I asked him. It was kind of like a blank stare when I asked him. But once I caught on to the fact that that was the pattern, it was about a minute, that I knew that was an auditory processing issue there. And his mom thought he was being stubborn, he was being willful, being non-communicative. No, he had a slow processing speed. Now, another aspect of auditory processing, which happens to me when I'm tired, is I can be talking to a person, and there will be times if I'm really tired, I know that the words coming out of their mouth are things I'm familiar with, but I don't know what the heck they're talking about. So all of a sudden, they don't make sense. There's other times where it's almost like the radio station fading in and out, where it's almost like their voice is skipping. You hear some of the words, and some of the words you don't. And so when I'm asking a person, you know, I'm really tired, can you just please say that again? I'm really trying to hear you, but just say it again. Because I'm hoping they're going to say the same words so that I can catch the ones that I missed before. Now imagine having auditory processing issues and you really want to have a conversation with someone. How frustrating it is to try and listen to somebody else and really take in what they're trying to say to you when your brain simply doesn't allow you to take in that information in an organized way. And you're asking them to repeat themselves, and they're getting really impatient with you, and they're accusing you of not listening, of not paying attention. Now try having auditory processing in a classroom. Is that going to work? And the solution is they need attention skills. No, they need to rewire their brain. In a classroom where any noise is enough to distract you. Somebody next to you is tapping their foot, tapping their pencil, ruffling some pages in a book. You have hypersensitive hearing. You hear what's happening in the hallway. You hear what's happening in the next classroom. All the while, your teacher wants your undivided attention and accuses you of being inattentive, easily distracted. Duh. You either have focus issues or you have auditory processing issues. And the context sabotages you. That's what I refer to as POTS, problems of the space. Which means there is something about that space that is not conducive to you being effective. Something about that space is sabotaging you. Earlier, when it was hot in here, feels much better now, doesn't it? It does for me. Can't speak for the rest of you. But if there's a problem in that space that sabotages you, there's only so much they can do for you strategically. You know, somebody who was paralyzed from the waist down isn't suddenly going to develop a strategy to get up and walk upstairs. You need a ramp. Sometimes you need to change the space. There's not always a ready-made strategy so you can do it all by yourself. If it got too hot in here, could I just think Cool. I'll just pretend I'm in Minot, North Dakota. Everything will be fine. Doesn't always work like that. Sometimes you need to physically change the situation you're in. So, questions, thoughts, concerns? Yes? I'm describing your son to a T. I didn't mean to. I apologize. So people whispering sounds like a loudspeaker? Does he also have focus issues? Because one thing that's particularly frustrating in my older boy, and I have this, if you are also very ADD, have executive functioning challenges, everybody familiar with executive functioning? It's everything that allows you to organize your experience. Being able to do things in a sequential manner. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Being able to remember things, being able to order things. Everything that goes into decision making. Anybody have the experience of, okay, I want you to do this, then I want you to do this. No, wait. Tell me the first thing. Let me do the first thing. As soon as it's done, then tell me the second thing. Anybody else have that experience? I've ticked off many a tech support person with that. Wants to tell me 3 things to do, then wants to go off and play Pong on his computer. It's let me know when you're done. No. We're going to do the first thing, then we're going to do the second thing. It's the only way it's going to happen. Because our brains are not organized enough to do things in a very orderly, sequential way. So if you have executive functioning issues, focus issues, that affects your ability to think straight. Do you realize that? And you need to be able to think without distraction, including someone else clearing their throat. I work with families where dinner conversation is a source of frustration because if somebody else is making noise, the person with the organizational issues gets really ticked off. And sometimes it's because that is annoying. Other times it's because, let's say you have fine motor issues. It takes a lot of concentration for you to manipulate a fork to put food in your mouth. And while you're focusing on that, someone's making noise and distracting you and disorganizing you. Make sense? But the kid who's having the organizational issues doesn't know what the problem is. Neither do the parents. They just want a happy family time together. When you have a disorganized nervous system and you have to give your undivided attention to getting anything to work in an organized manner, I need to concentrate on walking across the room and not tripping over my feet. I need to look at the ground when I walk because my vestibular and my proprioception do not play well together. So if I'm looking up and something else is moving, I will start to move too. Grocery shopping makes me sick to my stomach because if I am pushing the cart along and all of a sudden I look up and the cart next to me is passing, I will start moving with the cart next to me. So I need to look down. Driving, they say, look ahead. Forget you. I can't do that. I will get sick to my stomach. I need to look at the car in front of me because that's the only thing I need to make sure I don't hit. So I will look at that bumper. If the lights go on, I slow down. If it's too close, I will back off, but that's where my eyes are. If there's no cars in front of me, I look at the shoulder and I look at the line in the middle and I stay right between them. That's how I drive. Make sense? Somebody said, yikes, does that mean you don't want to be driving at the same time as me? The accidents I've been in, somebody else hit me. And I don't mean I pulled in front of them and they hit me. I mean they blew red lights. Every time I was in an accident, somebody rear-ended me or they blew a red light and they hit me. I haven't caused an accident because of the way I drive. Something you want to share with the class? I turn my blinkers on when it's absolutely necessary. Because what's the point of sitting in a left-hand turn lane? Click, 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 click. I'm just making the person behind me anxious. when he's going to turn any minute now. I know he's going to do it. He said he's going to do it. I wait till the car's in motion. But usually I have my earbuds in and I'm playing the music really loud so I can't hear it. I also can't hear emergency vehicles or people honking or anything like that, but that's a totally different story. Okay, hand over here.
So when you're driving, then how do you accommodate, like when you're in a big city, you have to read road signs and know which way to go?
So when I'm driving in a city, how do I accommodate reading road signs and where I need to go? 3 letters, G, P, S. Turn left right here. Turn, 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 turn. If it wasn't for that, I'm surprised my GPS does not cuss me out. That would be funny. Yeah, without my GPS, I wouldn't go anywhere. Because it's hard for me to have to keep checking road signs and taking my eyes off the road. It's very difficult. So GPS is, I would not go into the city without it.
What about changing lanes?
Changing lanes, there has to be, I make sure that there's a lot of space. Because the more cars that are around me, the more things I need to take in and process and account for, the more difficult it is to do. So I'll create a lot of space and make sure there's nobody near me, then I'll move over. Now keep in mind there are some people, because of their processing issues, they cannot drive and should not drive. Because there are some people that will say, well, it's a rite of passage. You need to be able to drive because it's part of being independent. That is not true. There are people who live in the big cities who do not and have never owned a car. Because part of being an adult means you can get where you need to go. There is nothing that dictates how that's accomplished. It can be public transportation, it can be a taxi cab, it can be your own 2 feet. What matters is you can get from point A to point B. There's a lot of variety for how to do that. There's nothing that says you have to be able to drive. If anything says that, that's because of the beliefs that have been imposed upon that child in terms of what it means to be a successful adult by other people who have decided that a measure of success is being able to drive. Questions, comments?
So what was causing my son just recently that anytime he gets in a vehicle, he gets car sick now?
All of a sudden, when he gets in a vehicle, he gets car sick?
He's fine.
How old is he? Now, when you say all of a sudden, when did you notice it?
It's been for a few months now.
So when you say he gets sick to his stomach, what is the experience he's describing?
That he feels like he's going to throw up.
Does he ever throw up?
Yeah, no, but he lays down, sat down like on the side of the door and puts his on, and if he looks up, he goes, I'm sick. He puts his head back down.
If he looks up, he says he's sick, he puts his head down. Does he ever throw a fit, have a meltdown at the thought of having to drive? How does he manage it?
He just closes his eyes and lays his head down the entire time he's in the vehicle.
So he closes his eyes and puts his head down. Okay, so we know it's not vestibular. Because doing that would make it worse.
Sits up and he doesn't lay down, that's, he can get car sick within 5 minutes. But if he lays down, puts his head down, closes his eyes, has the headphones on, he's good.
Okay, so putting his headphones on helps him.
He goes everywhere.
Okay. So something about auditory input helps him regulate whatever his experience is. It sounds like it might be something that's visual processing related. Because when you look at developmentally, at any point when the nervous system goes through a developmental phase, your nervous system can change. My nervous system did a 180 when I was 17 years old. It went from hyposensitive to hypersensitive. Because when I was younger, I was, banger and crasher, like doing somersaults and doing flips and, doing belly flops on the water, wouldn't feel it. Would cut my finger, wouldn't feel it. Sometime around my 17th birthday, all of a sudden I couldn't handle motion, things hurt, and I didn't know what the heck happened. Of course, now, in retrospect, I do. But just like that, for whatever reason, everything just shifted. So it's quite possible he's at one of those developmental stages where a sensitivity that did not exist before suddenly does. Like kids can have certain food sensitivities, texture sensitivities that after a while, it's fine. Or something they liked for a long time, all of a sudden they can't stand. So it's quite possible that's the case.